You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. We have dissected this LSU Florida State game from darn near every angle. We have talked about the absence of Mason Smith. We have talked about the two veteran quarterbacks. We have talked about LSU's improvement in special teams and their giant question mark in the secondary. We have talked about LSU's offensive tackles against the really good edge rushers from Florida State. We have talked about the head coaches, the marching bands, the school colors, and everything else. I don't know what other angles we can really dive into to dissect this game that haven't already been discussed. There's one kind of cool thing about the game, though, that we really haven't talked about at all. And that's the familiarity between these two teams. And I'm not just talking about the fact that LSU and Florida State played a year ago in New Orleans. They did, and so there is that familiarity because most of the players on both of these teams were in that game a year ago. I'm talking about away from the field how much these two teams, rosters, coaching staffs are familiar with each other. There are 7 players from Louisiana on the Florida State roster. Ja'Kai Douglas, number 0, is a wide receiver from Homa. Keon Coleman, number 4, wide receiver from Opelousas. Another guy who didn't have an LSU offer, went to Michigan State, transferred from Michigan State, didn't have an LSU transfer offer, goes down to Florida State. Number 7, Destin Hill, went to Edna Carr in New Orleans. He's a wide receiver. Number 21, Greedy Vance, also went to Edna Carr in New Orleans. Hill and Vance, by the way, were teammates at Carr with Aaron Anderson. So you could very well on Sunday see Greedy Vance guarding his former high school teammate Aaron Anderson in that game Sunday night down in Orlando. By the way, both are transfers. Vance went to Louisville, then Florida State. Anderson, as you know, went to Alabama and now is at LSU. C.J. Campbell, a running back, is from Kaplan, Louisiana. Byron Turner, the defensive tackle, is from St. Aug. Bless Harris, an offensive lineman, is from St. Aug. You got a lot of ties in this ballgame. It's not just on the roster. The coaching staff as well. David Johnson is Florida State's running backs coach. He was the head coach at St. Aug when Fournette and Tyrann Mathieu were there. Patrick Surtain Sr., we all know Jr., who, of course, had ties to New Orleans. Well, the reason he had ties to Louisiana is his dad is from New Orleans and played high school ball at Edna Carr. And, of course, LSU tried to recruit Patrick Surtain Jr., and he was at his dream school, as he self-described it, for a long time, until ultimately things fell apart late in that recruitment, largely because of some questions around Corey Raymond. But clearly, Surtain has ties to LSU and to the state of Louisiana as well. Beyond that also, Florida State has 2 transfers that LSU recruited heavily and wanted badly at what were clearly positions of need. The 2 spots that LSU went ham in the transfer portal were cornerback and defensive tackle. And 2 guys LSU wanted were Fentrell Cypress and Braden Fisk. Fentrell Cypress was the number 2 overall transfer in the entire portal behind Justin Hunter this past cycle. And the cornerback from UVA that picked Florida State, that LSU wanted. Braden Fisk is the defensive tackle from Western Michigan, who's a 5th-year senior and is a bull in a china shop on the interior. He can play 0 technique nose. He can play a 3 technique defensive tackle. He can even get out and play on the end as well as a defensive end. So there is so much familiarity when these two teams get on the field Sunday in Orlando, not just because they played a year ago. I mean, Will Campbell, in his first ever collegiate action, drew the assignment of blocking Jared Verse in that game in New Orleans a year ago. It didn't go well for Will Campbell, but it's understandable. He was 18, playing his first game ever against a guy that would have been a first-round draft pick this year. It's a very different Will Campbell now. Yeah, we're focused a lot on Jared Verse and Patrick Payton, who's the other defensive end. Verse last year had 17 TFLs and 9 sacks. The guy on the other side had 6 TFLs and 5 sacks. So they got 2 really good ends that are going to be going against LSU's elite offensive tackles in Emory Jones and Will Campbell. We've talked about that plenty. Maybe haven't talked as much about the interior, though, of that Florida State defensive line. I mentioned Fisk. Fisk is a redshirt senior. Fabian Lovett, a redshirt senior. Farmer, who's the third defensive tackle that rotates. He's a third-year player, redshirt sophomore. Everything I've heard out of Florida State is that their offensive line hasn't been able to block Braden Fisk, the transfer from Western Michigan. It's going to be a huge ask for the interior of LSU's offensive line with Charles Turner, with Miles Frazier, with Garrett Dellinger, whoever's going to draw that assignment on given plays to make sure that that interior doesn't wreck the game. But it's just very interesting when you look at the roster, the coaching staff, the familiarity with these two programs top to bottom. LSU and Brian Kelly has now opened up his season against Florida State 3 consecutive years. His final year at Notre Dame and now his first 2 seasons at LSU, all coached by Mike Norvell. So this is something that's very, very familiar. Coaches, players, roster, transfers, all of it, very interwoven. And it's like a mirror image of the two programs right now as they look at each other heading into the season opener. Both coming off of 10-win seasons. Both finished their season with a bowl win in Orlando a year ago. Now both come into this season with veteran quarterbacks, a lot of returning talent, top 10, national championship aspirations, and they're going to face off Sunday night in Orlando. It's going to be really cool to watch it all play out. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.